Hello, everyone, and welcome to this OneDrive for Business training. This is the introduction course. My name is Scott Kinsella. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and a Microsoft Office Specialist Master. Basically, I have been a Microsoft certified trainer for about 10 years. Matter of fact, I think we're on 11 years by this point. And I specialize in all of the end user products. So that's things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, and nowadays everything Office 365. Overall, though, I have been teaching these Office applications for 23 years. Oh my goodness, a long time. But I've been around the Office block since Office 4.3 came out way back in the 90s. So I've got lots of experience here in these Office products and working with them and teaching them to people like yourself. Currently, I work for a company called Planet Technologies. We're a Microsoft partner based up in Germantown, Maryland, and I spend my time working on various government contracts. I think I'm on 3 different ones right now, technically. But that being said, that's a little bit about me. Let's talk a little bit more about what we're going to learn in this class today. Oh, by the way, before we get started, the usual kind of ground rules, at least for those of you who are attending live. For those of you on YouTube, this stuff doesn't really matter as much. But for those of you attending live today, please keep your audio muted during class. If you have a question, just type it over in the Zoom group chat window, and I'll see it. I'll see it off to the side over here. We will have plenty of time for Q&A during class, so you're welcome to ask your questions while I'm going along, but we will also have kind of a free-for-all Q&A at the end. That will not be on this recording just because of a variety of reasons. But speaking of recordings, obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you know that I've recorded it. Like I like to record all of my sessions so that they are not only available live, though I do like having a live audience. It's much more fun that way. But this will be posted for those of you who are attending online today. So now let's get into our agenda for this OneDrive for Business introduction. So there's a lot of ground to cover today. And I don't know if you can see the small print on the screen right now, but I've got 140 slides in this presentation. And that's shorter than it was before. I actually did some editing on this this week, cut out a lot of extraneous slides and changed some things. And it was 180. I got it down to 140. But we got a lot of ground to cover here in OneDrive, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So what we want to do at the beginning here is just take a few minutes to understand what OneDrive for Business is in the first place. What is this tool that's part of Office 365? And then we want to take a closer look at, it's actually not a single tool, it's actually 3 tools all in one. So we'll take a closer look at that. And that's really going to guide our training overall in this session, is what are those 3 tools and how do we use them to be productive? Okay, then we're going to take time to look at how do you get to OneDrive for Business. One of the cool things of the many, and I'll say that a lot of times today, there are a lot of cool things about this application. But one of the things about OneDrive, especially amongst all the Office 365 products, is just all the different ways that you can get there by way of desktop or the web or the Office applications or mobile. There's lots of ways that we can get to OneDrive. So that's also very cool about that. We will look at using OneDrive then in all of those contexts. That's easy enough there. We'll look at specifically managing files in the web portal, and that'll make more sense why just the web portal there. And then we've got to devote some time here to sharing files and managing their access, because that is really one of the key components of OneDrive for Business, is this ability for us to share files with both internal and external users to really be more productive and work together in real time. So we will go over some basics of that and lots of stuff to talk about today. So let's understand what this product is. What is OneDrive? OneDrive is Microsoft's cloud storage service. Lots of companies have cloud storage nowadays. OneDrive has actually been around for a lot longer than you might realize, though it has gone through a variety of different names over the years and changes to the service and so on and so forth. It's kind of been around for a lot longer than you realize, and we won't. It's not that interesting unless you're a real nerd, but it's not that new. It's not that new. But overall, yes, it is part of the Office 365 suite of applications that you get when you get your subscription, which is a lot of the trainings that I've done, including Teams and SharePoint and so many other things. OneDrive is just one of the other things that comes in the package when you buy an Office 365 subscription. OneDrive for Business, and I'll talk more about that shortly, really does, though, have tools that are geared towards that business use. There are things in here that are, not I don't want to say specific to, but it is geared towards being used in a business environment. And these tools and features really make it a lot easier for you to share and collaborate on documents with your coworkers. It's, we're more and more these days looking at a modern office situation, where maybe we're all working in different locations in different places. And we need modern technologies like SharePoint and OneDrive for Business to enable us to work together even when we are in disparate locations. And OneDrive can certainly help with that. Now, I want to clarify something before I go too much further into this session. There actually are two flavors of OneDrive. There is a OneDrive for Business, and there is also a OneDrive that's just OneDrive, but I'm going to label it as personal, even though that's not the name of it. They aren't exactly the same. In some ways, they are exactly the same, but in a lot of others, they're not. What it basically comes down to is what kind of Office 365 subscription did you purchase? If you purchase one of the home-based subscriptions, you're going to end up with OneDrive, this OneDrive here, the one I've labeled OneDrive Personal. If you have a corporate or government or enterprise version of OneDrive, I'm sorry, of Office 365 subscription, you will end up with OneDrive for Business. To be much more fundamental about it, OneDrive for Business as part of your company environment is going to be, there's going to be certain aspects about that. They're going to be managed at a company enterprise level or government level, as opposed to the OneDrive Personal, which is all you and there's nobody else that's kind of got that sets any rules for it. This course is going to focus on OneDrive for Business because, yes, there are some definite differences between OneDrive for Business and OneDrive Personal as far as the interface and the tools. Again, for lack of getting too far into it, OneDrive Personal has more home friendly family type things, whereas OneDrive for Business is much more business oriented. That's just the way to think of it. So I may do a OneDrive Personal video or training at some point. 90% of what I'm going to talk about today does apply to both, but realize there are some differences. You can have both. You can have, and I do. I have a OneDrive Personal subscription and I have a OneDrive for Business. And if you looking at the recording here and you look down in the corner, you can see I've got the icons down there. We'll talk about that stuff later. It's possible to have both services depending on what subscriptions you have. Oh, and I forgot that there's this slide here. So this identifies some of those differences. The lists are much longer, but basically, OneDrive Personal is designed for personal, home, and family use. You can basically share with anybody by way of links. There's a free version that comes with 5 gigabytes. If you get a premium free, whatever, it's 100. And if you buy a home subscription, you get 1 terabyte. Again, on the business side, it's designed for business and corporate use. Your ability, now this is a key point right here, your ability to share when you're in a corporate or government environment is determined by the sharing policies of your company. So again, there may be things that I show you in this session that you're not going to be able to do because your company policies are different. A lot of times it comes down to, can you share files on OneDrive with users who are not part of your company? So we'll talk about that later. There's OneDrive for Business is only available through a subscription. You cannot just get a free ODFB account on its own. And again, it's got 1 terabyte of storage. So another thing to kind of mention here before we get into, again, the meat and potatoes is that OneDrive for Business, not only is OneDrive for Business cloud-based storage, but it's also something that runs on your computer. Like Teams, if you've taken any of the Teams sessions or had any experience with that, Teams both runs in the cloud and there's a desktop version of it. And OneDrive is the same way. There is a web-based version of it and it runs in the cloud, but there's also a desktop version of it. And we will talk a lot about that that as we go along today. It's called the OneDrive Sync Client, or I think the official full name is the OneDrive Windows Sync Client. But regardless, it does, the Sync Client runs in the background of Windows and makes your cloud files available locally. And again, we'll go into more detail of that later, but I want to kind of set up that understanding right now is that OneDrive is something that runs in both places and keeps things synchronized. So to quickly summarize our little bit of an introduction here, OneDrive for Business is part of an Office 365 subscription, and it has tools that are geared for business users to facilitate that sharing and collaboration. So I mentioned in the beginning that OneDrive is not a single tool. It's actually 3 tools in one. And this graphic here will guide a lot of our session here today. And that is OneDrive is a storage tool, it's a synchronization tool, and it's a sharing tool. Yay, they all start with S, okay? So it's a great little mnemonic there to remember that they all start with S, and that's storage, synchronization, and sharing. Those are the 3 things that OneDrive does. Let's touch on these a little more. Well, first off, as we've kind of already said, OneDrive is a storage tool. It's basically a place to put files. Like many other things like your computer and your network drive and SharePoint, it's yet another thing, another option that we have as a place to put files. Now, as we're going to see today, it has some definite advantages over things like the network and your regular home computer. But yes, at its most basic fundamental, just like the network or your home drive, OneDrive for Business is a place to store and put your files. Now, the next thing here, synchronization. This is the concept that maybe of the 3 of these, this is going to be the one that's more new to you. And that is, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Let me pop back a few slides. This graphic here of the computer and the cloud and how things are going back and forth. And this is what we mean when we're talking about synchronization. In that there's a program called the OneDrive Sync Client, which I mentioned already, that runs on Windows. And its job is to communicate with your OneDrive out in the cloud and make sure that whatever's on the cloud and whatever is on your computer in your local OneDrive are always exactly the same. And what that solves is the whole problem of offline. One of the big concerns I've heard throughout the years, people going, I don't like cloud storage services, and I get it, is that if you can't get to the cloud or you can't get to the internet, you can't get to your files. That's a big problem, right? But when you think about it, we have the same problem with networks, right? If you're not on your company's network or you don't have an internet connection, you're not going to get to those files. OneDrive solves that problem with the OneDrive synchronization client or the Windows Sync client. And basically, it keeps copies of everything that's out on the cloud that's in your OneDrive out there. It makes sure it's all copied onto Windows. And if anything changes on either side, so if I change something on the Windows side, it will upload it to the cloud. And if anything happens on the cloud side, it changes it back on the Windows side. So that if I don't have an internet connection, well, there's local copies of everything, so I can work on those files. And then when I do get an internet connection, the program goes, okay, we're back on the internet. Let's synchronize everything and make sure that we've got the same thing on both sides. It does all of this in the background transparently. You don't have to do a thing. All you got to do is have the program running. Again, if you look at my desktop down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see I've got OneDrive running there. Yes, I keep my Windows taskbar on the left. I'm weird like that instead of having it down at the bottom. I have my reasons. But I've always got it running on my computer. Lastly, the other key part of OneDrive is it's a sharing tool. It is our ability, it makes it very, very easy to share files with internal and external users. Yes, there are other ways to share, but they're always much more complicated, and often they're limited to internal users. But since OneDrive exists out on the cloud and on the internet, basically now all you got to do is just give somebody the keys, right? You just say, hey, you can get get to that file over there. And that's what we call sharing, is that by changing the permissions and providing that link, I can collaborate with other users on that file. And this makes us, this just opens up a whole world of possibilities of getting out of emailing files to each other, especially when you want to collaborate and work on stuff. So again, at the end, towards the end of today, we'll talk a lot more about the sharing aspect. But these three things are really going to guide our discussion today: is the storage aspect, the synchronization aspect, and the sharing aspect, or the tools. These are the tools, the three tools, the three things that OneDrive does for us. It is a 3-in-1 tool. All right, now, before we get too much further in the nuts and bolts of OneDrive, there is always a kind of an elephant in the room, and I kind of already mentioned it. And that is, okay, Scott, you're saying that I've got yet another place to put files. I mean, how many places do we have to put them nowadays? Yeah, depending on your corporate environment, you may have now 3 or 4 different places to put your files. And that can be a little problematic. Let me at least narrow it down to our Office 365 options, because I don't know what you have at your company or other places, but let's talk Office 365 for a moment. Because to be truthful, OneDrive is not the only storage location that we have for files. As a matter of fact, the other one also starts with S. Wow, it's all these S words today. SharePoint. SharePoint yet is another place where we can store files as part of Office 365. So that begs the question, well, which one do I use when, if they're both designed for storing? And by the way, they're both also designed for sharing. SharePoint, by the way, doesn't do synchronization. We'll talk about that in a different course, though. That's actually enabled by OneDrive. Okay, I'm on a tangent. But anyways, let's talk about this. They do have, they're both places to store files. They're both places to share files. So the question is, which one do I use when? All right, so let me cover this briefly here, because otherwise we got so much other stuff to cover, but I want you to have this in your frame of mind now. First off, OneDrive is your personal storage space. Access to it and everything about it is pretty much controlled by you, except for some other certain things at the corporate level. But for the most part, your OneDrive is your fiefdom, your kingdom, your land to control. It's all you, okay? It's mine. From a sharing aspect, okay, so that's the storage aspect of it. From a storage aspect, it is your personal space. From a sharing aspect of this location, OneDrive is ideal for what we call peer-to-peer and or limited time sharing. So if I want to collaborate on a file with Sharon, I would put it, if it's just me and her, I could put it on my OneDrive, share it off of there, and then Sharon and I, oh, yay, a pun, sort of, can work on that file together while it's on my OneDrive, okay? When we're done, I'll turn that sharing off. I'll take Sharon's access away, and ta-da, that's it, okay? So it should be for a limited time, and it should be, I mean, I can share a file with multiple people, but it should be limited and small and on a one-time basis, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I do have another slide here. So OneDrive is not ideal for sharing files on a long-term basis with a large group. It is more for sharing with a small number of individuals for a short amount of time. Part of that is also this second bullet point here. A big problem with sharing things on OneDrive is that if you leave your company or government agency, often your account is completely shut off. Well, if you had files that you'd put there and shared with your whole department, well, they're going to lose access to that because your OneDrive has been shut off. So that's yet another reason why OneDrive is not an ideal location for something that people need long-term access to, or it's a large group, okay? SharePoint, however, is the place for that. Now let's talk about the storage part first. SharePoint is also storage space, but it's shared storage space. It's a space that is allocated to a group of people, by way of a site or a library. And Now all of us have access to that. It's like we all get keys to the same playground or room or whatever. Anything we put in there, we can all access because it's shared. That space then, that who can store stuff there, is controlled by some sort of site owner or site administrator. From the sharing standpoint of things, because of its nature, um, because we can all get in there, things are automatically shared when we put them there. So SharePoint is a great location for, hey, my entire department needs to have access to this file, or the entire project team, or whatever. Or, I'm putting this document out here so that we can all refer to it. It's a template for proposals, whatever. This needs to be here forever. SharePoint is a good thing for that. So SharePoint is ideal for peer-to-group sharing with no time limits. So SharePoint is ideal for sharing files on a long-term basis with a large group. Because if you leave the company, well, they're not going to turn off SharePoint, because SharePoint's running across everything. So if I leave a government agency or a company, anything I put on that respective SharePoint is still going to be there. Matter of fact, at least two different government agencies that I've worked at, I know still, I set up training SharePoint sites for them. They're probably likely still there. And they're not going to go away just because I leave. They're publicly available sites. So where you store your files, OneDrive versus SharePoint, you got to ask yourself a few questions. Are they personal files, or are they group files? How many people are you sharing with? Do you need controlled access or preset shared access? How long do your collaborators need access to those files? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself, and then you can make a decision about, okay, this belongs on OneDrive or this belongs on SharePoint, okay? All right, I wanted to cover that now because we got so much other stuff to cover the rest of today, and I think it just will help your understanding about some things as we go through the other sort of stuff. The key points to remember from this section: OneDrive is your personal storage space for peer-to-peer sharing and collaboration. SharePoint is your shared group storage for group sharing and collaboration. Okay? All right, let's move on. Accessing OneDrive for business. I use the word accessing because that was just a broad enough term. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the really cool things, there are many cool things about OneDrive. Who am I kidding? But one of the cool things about OneDrive is that there are just so many ways to get to what's out there. And there are basically four. There is a web portal, which we will spend a bunch of time in here very shortly. There is the Windows client, like I've already talked about. We can use the Windows client to get to our OneDrive files. OneDrive is integrated with all of the Office applications, so I can access my OneDrive files right from within Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Outlook. And if you have need of it, oh, sorry, I was charging my phone. You can even, there are apps for mobile, and you can access OneDrive that way. Now let me put this back on the charger so I don't, so it's fully charged later. All right, so let's briefly talk about what these methods are, and then we're going to go into some detail. So first off, there is a web portal. So I've actually got that all up here already. If you're familiar with Office 365, you should be familiar with the Office 365 portal, which you get to at portal.office.com. When you go to that site, then you'll log in. You can click on the OneDrive tile. It's right there. And then you will actually then see your OneDrive here. And we will go through this interface a lot more very shortly. We'll go through all the details here. To be perfectly honest, again, the web or the cloud version really is where everything lives. The cloud version of OneDrive really is the core main location for everything. But the Windows client, as we're going to see, helps us sync things up. So first off, that's one way to get to stuff. We will dive more into that interface later. Right now, I just want to introduce each one, then we'll go into some details. Okay, next, there's a Windows client. So if you have the Windows client running, which you should if you're using OneDrive, you actually don't have to. You can actually use OneDrive quite well without it. But let me tell you, it just brings you so many extra benefits to have that on there. So I've already got it running down here. You can see there's a blue cloud and a white cloud. Again, that's because I've got both personal and business. So if you are running both, just so you know, the business version will use a blue icon, and the personal version will use a white icon. So right here, I can click on that cloud icon, just give it a simple click, and I can see, I can access my files through there. And you're gonna see there's a lot more to this Windows client shortly because, again, the role of the Windows client, as we've mentioned, is to run in the background and make sure there's an exact copy of everything on the web on your local computer. So we will look at that shortly and see where that's located on your actual workstation and so on and so forth. But its job is to make sure, the client's job is to make sure that everything is always equal on both sides and you don't have to worry about it. It's all completely transparent and runs in the background. Our third method for getting to our OneDrives is we can get to them through any of the Office applications. So if I start, I've got PowerPoint running here, but let me start up Word really quick, just to show you quickly, and then we'll deal more with it. But in any of the Office applications, if you are properly signed in to your Office 365 account, hopefully you are, when you go to the Open pane here, you'll see any OneDrives that you've got available. So if you look here, I've actually got 4 of them listed here. I've got, this one is my business one. Here is one for work. Here is my personal OneDrive. And then because I've also set my parents up with OneDrive, I've got access to their accounts and I can get to there from Office as well. So I can access any of the files that are on OneDrive right from the Office applications. And we'll go into that more a little bit later. Okay, just make sure though, if you don't see that stuff, make sure you're signed in to Office 365 inside of the app, inside of Word or Excel. Once you're signed into one, you're signed into all of them. And if you still don't see it, there's usually something here that allows you to add service. It's always on the account page. We'll get to that. You can always add the service and make sure that everything is all tied together the way it needs to be. Okay. Lastly, yes, there is a mobile application. All right, let me try to do this without ripping my phone. I'll take it off nicely. Yes, there is a mobile application that is available to you for your mobile device. Both Android and iOS have an app that allow you to access your files on a mobile device. I'm not going to talk about the mobile stuff too much today for 2 basic reasons. Number one, it's hard to demonstrate that stuff on my screen without funky whatevers. I still have yet to figure out a good way to do that. But secondly, a lot of companies and especially government clients limit our ability to use the mobile app for a variety of security reasons. Matter of fact, every government client I've worked with so far pretty much always says, nope, we're not going to allow mobile access to OneDrive. So I've just not worked with it a lot, at least from the government space. I actually have it running on my phone for my personal stuff. So we're not going to cover the mobile aspect too much in this session, except to talk about it a little bit here and there. Just be aware. So you may not be able to use the app. Excuse me. Now, if you got a home version, yes, you can download OneDrive and use it on your phone, blah, blah, blah. Okay? All right. So we've got lots of ways to get to OneDrive. We can get to it through the web portal. We can get to it through Windows client. We can get to it through our Office applications, and we can get to it through the mobile app. And they're all looking at the same location. They're all looking at that. They're basically all looking at the web and getting everything from there. So that's how to get there. Now let's get into these more detailed and talk about how to use each one. Okay, we've got these 4 different methods. Let's talk more about how on 3 of them, we actually use the different interfaces. So first off, since it is the most feature rich, and as I said, really the true OneDrive, if we need to call it that, since the web portal really is the main version, let's talk about that one first. Okay, so as I already said, make sure you are logged into, open up any web browser. It doesn't matter. I'm actually using which one am I using here? I'm using the Chromium version of Edge, the newest version of Microsoft Edge. You can use any browser that you want, but make sure you log into the portal, and then you can always start OneDrive from the OneDrive tile up here, and that will bring you to something that looks like this. Let me move that window up a little bit. Right there. Okay. So this is OneDrive, and we'll go through a bit more of this interface here after a couple more slides. You'll log in with whatever credentials have been assigned to you by your place of work. Usually it's your email address, okay? Click on the app tile. I already talked about that. And then once we're in here, the interface is basically made up of 5 parts. Not going to take a ton of time here because it's all common, but I at least wanted to have these things in here for those of you that I've sent the file to with the slides. You can refer to this later. But basically, look, we've got a ribbon, a search box, a navigation pane, a file and folder list, and a details pane. Okay. The ribbon is right up here. Okay, all these Office 365 applications are pretty much set up the same way. There's some sort of simple ribbon up here that will change and show whatever commands we need it to show. There is a search box that is up top. Okay, Microsoft has been moving the search box on everything up to the top nav bar, so that's where it's currently located. There's a navigation pane over here on the side with different views. And as we'll talk about in later courses, you can access stuff in SharePoint right from OneDrive. That's another cool feature. Y'all should be making a list here of everything I say is cool. Of course, probably be way too long of a list. Okay, we have our file and folder list. Now, when you first look at this, it might be organized a little differently. It might look like, oops, let me click on this one. It might look like this with different tiles. Okay, kind of looks like Windows. I prefer to use the list. I'm just switching the views over here. We'll talk more about all these buttons later. But basically, we've got our file and folder list in the middle. And then the part that you might not be as familiar with, and that's what's called the details pane. On any folder or file, if I select it, don't click it, and then click the information symbol over here on the right-hand side, you will see a panel will show up, or a pane will show up on the side, and it will have lots of details about that item. Depending on whether it's a file or a folder, you'll see different things listed here. We'll go into some more detail about, pun intended, we'll go into some more detail about the details pane later. But that may be the one part you're not as familiar with here, is that there is this kind of open and close side pane called the details pane that shows us more information about things. We'll work with that a little bit more later. Okay. One thing I need to make you aware of, as of this video right now when I'm shooting it, which is April 15th, 2020, things look this way. But especially with all things Office 365 and online, stuff can change at any minute. I've had many a class be caught with my pants down because Microsoft changed something like literally that day, and now something's different in the interface. So just keep that in mind as you go through this whole training today, that if you're watching this 3 months later, something may have changed between today and 3 months later. Okay, all right. So that's a quick look at the web portal. We'll work with that more here a little bit later as we get into different file management things. Keep in mind that the web portal really is the main version of OneDrive. And there actually are certain features you can only access by way of the web portal. So you may have to use the web portal for some things. Interestingly enough, I've been at enough companies and stuff where people they just think OneDrive is on the Windows side. They have no idea that there's a web portal there. I'm like, yeah, that's actually the primary part of OneDrive, not what you see on Windows. This is the main one. So you definitely need to know that it exists and how to get there. And I'll actually show you there's another way to get there, which will come up next when we talk about the Windows client. So yes, as I've said a couple of times already, there is a OneDrive, what's called a Windows Sync client that runs on your computer, and it not only makes sure everything is synchronized between the cloud and your Windows workstation, but it also facilitates the integration of OneDrive into many things in Windows, as we'll see here in a moment. So it allows you to access your OneDrive right from Windows Explorer. That's the really cool thing, is that OneDrive now just gets treated like another hard drive practically. So again, very cool that it does that. So again, this client runs in the background, and it makes sure that everything is always in sync on both ends. And if there's no internet connection to do that, that's fine. It will wait until there is one, and then when it detects an internet connection, it'll go about its business. All right. The whole point of that is so that we can work on things offline. If you need to take a flight somewhere, or you're working in a cabin in the woods and there's no internet, know that the main reason for the client, one of the big reasons for this Windows client, is so you can work with things offline. So that, yes, I can take my work files with me, if you've got a laptop, and work on stuff. Okay. And if you don't have a laptop, well, you can still work on your OneDrive files if you're allowed to log into things from the web. So there you go. See, lots of ways to get to things. Okay. All right. So how do we open and work with the Windows client? There's actually 4 kind of ways that we can do to see what's going on here. So look at your taskbar. Now again, mine is over on the left. Yours is probably down at the bottom, but on your Windows taskbar, you should see, in this case, I'm going to want to do the blue icon cloud, because that is my business version of OneDrive. All you need to do is just single click that, and that opens up the OneDrive interface of the sync client. And this shows me any files I've worked on recently, which means I can also access them right from here. I could click on any of these, and I can open these files. There's a 3-dot menu here that I can click, and I can look at get to a variety of features, which I'll talk about those later. I can get to lots of different features right from here. So I can just single click that icon, and that is going to show me stuff there. Let me advance the slide. So I can single click that. Now, once I single click this, okay, to open the interface, if I really want to then see the local copy of everything in Windows, I'm like, okay, this is the program. Now show me where everything actually is on my computer. Well, down here, you'll see there's an open folder. And if I click that, oh, it came up in the other window. So I need to bring that over here. This is my OneDrive. Okay, there we go. This and this, if you look, are exactly the same. See, here is a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 9 folders here. If I look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There they are. And there's some weird system files that you don't need to worry about. Okay, but this is exactly the same as this, and it's the client's job to make sure they're all in sync. Okay, all right. So that's one way to get to the local stuff. Number 2, if you want to kind of skip the whole single click and then click the open folder, you can just double click the cloud icon, and that will do literally the same thing. It's still 2 clicks. It's just 2 faster clicks as opposed to what we did earlier. So double clicking the icon will also open up the Windows or local side of OneDrive. Okay, method 3. Hello. Okay. Right click. Again, this is a 2-clicker, but you can also right click the icon, and then you get a pop-up menu here. And there's also a the first one. I went too far. Open your OneDrive, and I can select that. Does the same thing. All of this is to cater to our different styles of things. Some people like to double click, some are right clickers, whatever. It all works. You see, we all end up in the same place. There's a 4th method, and that is if you're actually already in File Explorer. If you've already opened up Windows File Explorer, which let me just click that again, it's going to bring up the same thing. Now, this time it doesn't take me right to my OneDrive folder, but that's okay, because all you got to do is look over in the navigation pane, and it's going to be there somewhere. So you might actually have it in your quick access section here. Or if not, you might just need to scroll down a bit and see, here you can see I've got two OneDrives connected to my home computer. Again, both my personal one and my OneDrive for Business account. I have both of those here. Okay, and they show up. And again, if I click this, look, there it is. There's all the folders. So yet another way to get to the local copies of everything. So lots of ways to get to that window, all the stuff that's on Windows locally. Now, when we are, oops, I lost the window. I closed it. Sorry, I got too excited. So now when we actually are in here, when we are looking at the local Windows side of things, there are some status icons, or what are technically called overlays. And we get these so that we have information about what is currently happening with OneDrive. So if you look, all of my OneDrive clouds and folders and files all have these little green check marks down at the bottom that you wouldn't normally see. And that little green check mark tells me something. And in that case, it tells me the file is in sync. It's like, look, this here, and let me go to a specific file. So let me go into training. Let's go into sample files. So what that icon tells me is that all of these files are absolutely in sync and the same as the ones that are on the web. So if I can go here into training, and then I go into here into sample files, now, we're not going to see those here in the cloud. We don't need them. We already understand that this is OneDrive. This is where everything lives. What the Windows client is telling me, though, is look, all of these are in sync. These files and these files are all the same. Everything's good. And if OneDrive is doing its job, that's all you should ever really see. However, you might actually see a couple of other icons there. You might sometimes briefly catch two little blue arrows kind of chasing each other in a circle on a folder or a file. That just means that file is right now syncing with the cloud. And it could be that the Windows copy changed and it's uploading, or maybe the one on the cloud was changed and it's now syncing back down. It's not going to tell you which way. You're just going to see it. You may never catch it. You literally kind of have to sit there and look at it and go, oh, look, there it goes. So now on a large file, that might take longer, obviously, but most small files, you probably will never really see it. The only other one to be worried about is, yes, there can be sync problems. Something might happen. There are myriad reasons why, but if there is a problem, it could, I won't get into all the possible issues, but if there's a problem, you'll see a red circle with a white X in it. And then there will be something in the client over here. When you do the single click, you can go to the menu in here and it'll tell you what files or how you can possibly resolve the problem. Okay, I don't have any issues, so I don't really have any to demonstrate right now. So those are the ones you can see. Overall, when we are working, so just to say, when we are working on the local side of things, since this is all basically integrated into Windows Explorer, look, you just use all the stuff you normally do in Windows to work with the stuff on OneDrive. Everything about copy, rename, delete, drag, move, blah, 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 all of it's literally the same, okay? So there's really no special procedures for working with stuff here. However, there are some things that there are some OneDrive, there is some OneDrive functionality you're not going to find on Windows. Well, because, okay, there's some things, again, as I said, that are only available in the web portal that we won't find on the client side. This list will make more sense later, but I've included it here for now. But these are the features that you won't find that are available in the web, but not available on Windows Client. And most of these aren't gonna give you too much trouble. Okay. Now, here's another clever little thing. You can access the web portal from Windows. Along with that whole open folder business that's right here, there's also a view online. And I can, right from Windows, launch the web version where all of the main features are. So if I just click View Online here, it will kick open a web browser and it will go right to the site. Now I might have to sign into it. Now my default browser is different here on my home computer. So it'll probably prompt me for credentials, which it should. Okay. Bump it up and up. There we go. I would pick an account, type in my password, which obviously is just all dots. I do not want to stay signed in. And here we go. Now, I already had this open in another browser, but I just wanted you to demonstrate that this is also possible. So if you're like, wow, that web interface that Scott was talking about, look, there's another way to get here. There's so many ways to get to OneDrive. It's neat. Okay, well, I don't need to keep this open, so let's close that window. All right, so to summarize a little bit about the Windows client, the OneDrive for Business Windows Sync client, easy for me to say, uses many familiar Windows processes and procedures for managing your files. So once you know how to get there, you can work with your OneDrive files right on your local computer. And the big benefit to this Windows client is it allows us to work on things locally or offline without an internet connection if we don't have it. Okay. All right. Next, getting to OneDrive and the Office apps. I went through this real quick earlier. Let's go through a few details. As we already said, you can get to OneDrive also through all of the Office applications. That's by design, okay? The caveat, just make sure that in that product that you're signed in to Office 365. And if you're not, or you're not sure, just go to the File menu and click on Accounts, and make sure that you're signed into your accounts right here. You'll see it in the user information. Just make sure that you're signed in and or you're connected to the appropriate service, okay? This is going to depend, how this all works here is going to kind of depend on your company policies. So you may or may not, mine's set up a little different again because I've got multiple accounts that I'm working with. But as you can see here, especially in Office 365 Pro Plus, I can connect to multiple OneDrive services and accounts right from Office. So just make sure. Once you've done all the sign in here, then all of it appears right here in the Places pane. I can easily then access any OneDrive. And right now you can see I can get to 4 different ones right from within Office. So I can very well just go, all right, let me go to OneDrive, this OneDrive. If I click that, hey, look, same thing, right? Here's the same 9 folders. There's that training folder. Here are all of these sample files. Now, since I'm in Word, it's only showing the stuff I can open in Word. But the point is, I can get to everything in OneDrive right from here, okay? Right from within the Office applications. So yay, convenient, easy, love it, okay? All right, so the Places pane, okay? Open Save and Save As will have the OneDrives listed, okay? Select one of them and use them if you've got multiple, all right? Me, I got multiple, I select the one I need. Now, here's a little clever thing. Even apps that aren't actually directly integrated into OneDrive can actually get there by a sneaky method. And thanks to the Windows client and how the Office apps handle things, it's very possible to go into a different program and see all your stuff from OneDrive. Okay, basically, I'm trying to think of a non-Windows program I could open here really quick that would be a good example for. Basically, if you go to the File Open menu of any of your products, any program, and you've got the Windows client running, well, that all comes back to here because all Windows applications, when they open files, really are just opening File Explorer. So if you've got the Windows client, you can get to your OneDrive files in other programs. Might want to check on some of that though. Some of them don't work with cloud stuff as well, but basically you can do it. Okay. All right. So to summarize this section, our third method, Microsoft Office has direct support for OneDrive, and you can access all of your files that are both on the cloud and local. I mean, it is all the same stuff right from within the Office application. And if you're using other programs that it's not integrated, you absolutely still can by thanks to the Windows client. Okay. Now, as I already mentioned, we're really not going to talk mobile as far as accessing. I mean, about all I can say is, look, install the app on your phone and sign in if you're allowed and go for it. But it's hard. maybe I'll do a separate course for that on here, but right now, just not going to get into that. So with that being said, let's dive more into the web portal. Really, there's not much to say about file management in Office because that's not the place where we manage files from. And as we already said, here in Windows, we already pretty much know how to manage files here in Windows. That's not, really that's not rocket science either. So I don't really need to spend any time talking about how to use Windows File Explorer. I'm going to assume you know how. So what we do need to spend some time on is that maybe in the web interface, you're not that familiar with things. The slides are here because I don't have enough time to go through every one of these procedures. I'm just going to talk through a lot of this very fast-ish. This is the section I usually go through pretty quickly, mostly because a lot of these things are things that you've already seen in other places. So these are the 16 most common commands. Let me just kind of run through the slides. If you're watching this on YouTube, I would suggest you pause and then read each one, and you can play around with it. But basically, these are the 16 commands that you're going to find on the ribbon or on any of the three-dot menus to work with your files. So we have things like, as I already talked, you can change the view. I kind of demonstrated that earlier. You can sort your files using the sort on the ribbon. Filters aren't as common in OneDrive, but you can get to those by way of the column headings here, if that column can be filtered. I already showed you how to get to the details pane. There's a lot of great information about a file in that details pane. You can create new files right in OneDrive using the new button. And these are all the different types that you can create. You can upload stuff to OneDrive using the upload button. If you've taken any of the SharePoint courses that I've done, we've done this exact procedure. But yeah, there's an upload button right here. That's how to upload stuff. Or on the Windows side, just drag it into the Windows folder, drag it into the Windows side of OneDrive, and it'll upload it for you. Easy enough. You can open files in OneDrive. Just click on them. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just be aware that when you are opening files on the web side, they're going to open in your web browser. Basically, it's easy to remember. If I'm on the web, it's going to open in the web. If I'm in Windows, it's going to open in Windows. So if I'm looking at OneDrive files here on my Windows computer and I open them from here, they're going to open in the Windows version of that application. If I'm on the web side, if I open up an Office file, it's going to open up in Word Online or Excel Online. We talk about this a lot more in the SharePoint class. Again, there's a lot to cover here, so you might want to look at that or try some of these things out on your own. Once a file is open, you can edit it. All right. No matter whether it's in the web interface or in Windows, everything takes care of itself. And especially in the new versions of Office 365 Pro Plus on your computer, it even does autosave. So you don't even have to worry about clicking save to make sure that things are saved. All right. We can move files and folders in OneDrive using the move command. We've got a copy command that we can do. So we've got all these kind of standard Windows things to move things around in the web portal. So again, all of these things are available right up here. So I can, again, if I want to move a file, I can select it. Okay, and then you'll see we've got the commands. My window's a little bit smaller here, so I got to go to the three-dot menu here, but there's a move and copy commands right here. So I can move stuff within OneDrive. And actually, when we get to the OneDrive and SharePoint class, you'll see you can also use these move to and copy to commands, just to show you really quick. You're not limited to moving and copying inside of OneDrive. You can actually move and copy to SharePoint as well. The only thing you can't do with those commands is move and copy to someone else's OneDrive. That doesn't work. But you can move and copy to SharePoint, and then somebody else can go to SharePoint and move and copy them down to their OneDrive. But I can't take something from my OneDrive and copy it over to Ken's or something like that. That just doesn't work. All right. So move and copy. Good basic stuff there. We can rename files. It's on the three-dot menu. You can download files. Now, I don't always recommend this, but if you really need a different local copy that isn't part of OneDrive, you can download stuff from the web. Not really necessary though if you have the Windows client running. But if for some reason maybe your company doesn't use the Windows client and you do need local copies of things, you can use the download feature in the web portal for that. Again, remember, all these commands I'm talking about are for the website, for the web portal. On Windows, we just do everything the way we've always done it in Windows. Okay? All right. We'll talk more about the version history feature actually in the second class, in the Beyond the Basics class, which again, you might actually, right now it's not on the web yet, but by the time you watch this, it might. We'll get into a lot more about version history. Basically, since OneDrive runs on SharePoint technology, and since SharePoint does version history and versioning, OneDrive does it too automatically. Okay, so you can always, and that's another big benefit of OneDrive, is that you can always go back a version or two if your file gets totally screwed up. You can go back 1 to 10 versions and go back to what it used to look like. All right, we'll do that more in the intermediate class. There is a sync command here in OneDrive, but if you're already running the sync client, you don't really need it. It's basically already, you've already got it working. So while it's there, it's really designed to start the sync process or do it for you. But if you've already got the Windows client, you don't really need it. Okay, we've got a recycle bin. Now, the thing to note about the recycle bin is that whatever side you delete it on is that side's recycle bin you're going to see it in. Okay, so if I delete it in Windows, it's going to show up in my Windows recycle bin. If I delete it on the OneDrive side, it will appear over there. Okay, overall, with OneDrive files, they will appear in your recycle bin for up to 90 days. Actually, technically, I think it's 93 days. So after that time, things are going to disappear. The reason for that is, again, because that's a SharePoint thing, and OneDrive basically follows that rule. If you delete stuff, you can restore it. And as we've seen in the web interface, there's a recycle bin right here. I can go into that recycle bin and look at anything that's been deleted, and I can restore stuff from here, again, for up to 93 days. Okay? All right. I know that was a fast thing through those commands. I could actually take a good 45 minutes to go just through that stuff, but there is other things I really need to get to in introduction class, especially when it comes to sharing. So that was a quick run through on a lot of those commands. Again, most of these are pretty self-explanatory in the interface here, things that you can do in OneDrive. Okay, I would say the ones that might be the newest to you are things like the move and copy interface are a little bit different. The details pane, like we talked about earlier, is something that you might not be as familiar with. But I think the rest of these, and versioning, but we'll talk about versioning in another class. Okay. All right. Let's get into talking about sharing. Again, I know I've run through that section kind of fast. Again, most of that is stuff I think we have experience with. But the whole business of sharing and how that works in OneDrive is a new concept. So we kind of need to talk about that because there's different ways and places to start this from. So as we mentioned earlier, hey, this graphic should look familiar, right? I like to keep using these things. It's a teaching thing, right? Keep bringing things back. OneDrive is 3 tools in one, and we've talked about storage. We've kind of indirectly talked about synchronization, and now we want to spend time on that third thing, and that's the whole sharing deal, because that's really an important feature of OneDrive. So yeah, it's a sharing tool. Sharing files with other users is what allows us to collaborate on those files with other users in real time. What's different about it here in OneDrive is that we're all working on the same copy. We tend to misuse the word sharing when we email a file to somebody. Say, well, I'm going to share it with that person, so let me email you a copy. You're already wrong, or at least the first part of your statement is wrong. The second half is right. If you email something to someone, you're emailing them a copy, and that copy is different than the one that you have because, well, copies are not the same as the originals, and therefore you really can't collaborate together on the same thing. Really what's happening is, if I've got my copy and I've sent another one to John, well, John's doing his and I'm doing mine, and then some point later we got to pull them together. No, it's not 2002 anymore, it's 2020. Now what we should do is share a link with somebody, share a link with someone to a file, and then we both work on the same file. And that is something that OneDrive does really well. Okay. What's important to understand, though, is there actually really is a difference between this idea of sharing and collaborating. They are two related but different concepts, okay? Because you can share a file, but not necessarily be able to collaborate on it. So let me dive into this a little more. When we share a file, what you're doing is you're changing the permissions of that file so that other people can get to it, okay? Remember, in your OneDrive, it's your personal fiefdom. You control it. It's all about you. So you're the one that will share files with other users. And when you do that, what you're really doing is you're changing the access. You're giving somebody the keys to that file so they can get to it. That's what you're doing, okay? And when you share that, when you go into OneDrive and you share a file, that's what it's doing. It's changing the permissions or giving somebody the keys so that they can get to that file. And that's what's called, that's how we need to think about sharing in modern environments now, okay? Giving someone a copy of a file is not sharing it with them. That's giving somebody a copy. Sharing a file with somebody is physically changing the permissions on one thing so we both can get into it, or all of us can get into it. Then the second half of that process is something called collaborating or collaboration. And what that means is once I've shared a file, collaboration is the ability for all of us to be, or multiple people to be in a file at the same time, okay? Again, this is where we're kind of shifting definitions on words. Yes, we've had shared drives on our networks for decades now, but almost always with networks is that, okay, the file is shared, and yes, all of us can kind of work on the file when we can, but when it comes to networks, we can only work on them one at a time. So while we're collaborating, we're not really collaborating. I know that's an odd statement. Really, in modern offices now, when we talk about collaboration on a file, or co-authoring is another word that you'll hear, what we're actually talking about is real-time collaboration. And that is multiple users can be in the same file at the same time making changes and edits, okay? That is actually not a feature of OneDrive, oddly enough, okay? Being able to collaborate on files is a function of the application that's working with that file. So here's what I mean by this. Sharing is handled by OneDrive. OneDrive is the one that says, okay, this file is now shared. Collaboration is actually managed by whatever application owns the file. So like a Word file. Word is the one that actually handles the collaboration part. Excel is the one that handles the collaboration part, and so on and so forth. What I'm kind of more getting to here is, for instance, let's take PDFs as an example, all right? You can share a PDF with somebody else, but what are the capabilities of real-time collaboration in Adobe Acrobat? I'm not even sure. I'm not an Adobe expert. But I'm kind of using that as an example for it's possible to share a file with somebody, but not be able to collaborate on it because that kind of file and the application maybe don't support collaboration. However, with all things Microsoft, yes, absolutely. Sharing and collaboration is something that we can do. For this session, we just want to talk about the sharing aspect of things, because how collaboration happens and works is a whole class in and of itself. Because even within Microsoft, like even within Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and OneNote, all four of those applications do collaboration a little bit different. So that's a whole class in and of itself. So since sharing is facilitated by OneDrive, that's what we want to talk about now. Now, files that are stored your files that are on OneDrive, no matter what platform you access the file on, you can share it from that platform. That's actually kind of new-ish. It used to be that you couldn't do that. But now, yes, Microsoft has made it so that no matter what way you're accessing the files, whether it's through the web, through Windows, through Microsoft Office, or even on a mobile device, you can take that file and grant sharing permissions. Okay. We're going to talk about the first three. Again, I'm leaving out mobile. I'm sorry, but we just don't have time to cover it, and it's again a thing unto itself. What's also, though, very cool right now about the sharing process is with the other three, it's literally the same process, which is different than how I used to teach it last year. It used to be that there were 3 different ways. Now it's the same way across everything. So that's nice. Now, if you see a different way, that could be that you're on an older version of Office or an older version of the Windows client or something along those lines. But right now, the start process is different, which I'll show you that. But then once you start it, how you share in that dialog box is the same across everything. So that's really good. So if I do want to share a file, how do I kick that off? So let's look at these one at a time. If I'm in the web portal, so if I'm over here in OneDrive on the web, if I'm using the web side of things, I just go and find the file that I want to share. Not too difficult. I'm just going to select it. Okay, don't click its name. I mean, you can and share from within there, but it's easier here. Just select the file, and then voila, right up at the top, we've got a share button. Again, this is the best way. It's the easiest way. This is the most complete, but as you also see, the other methods do the same thing. I'll go through all of this stuff shortly. I want to show you how we start it, and then I'll go through some of the stuff that's here. But there we go. We're going to send a link. There's stuff that we can do here, and then I can share it. I'll go through that stuff shortly. All right. If I'm in Windows, all right, if I'm over on the Windows side, how do I share? Well, on the Windows side, the way you start it is you're going to right-click on the file, all right? And then you're going to go share right there. Question from the audience. Can you choose more than one file at a time to share? No. What I'll say is this. I can't select 5 individual files and share them, and that's all because of web links. So because you can't have one URL pointing to 5 different files. What you can do is that you can actually share a folder. We go into this more in the intermediate class, but if you've got a folder that has 5 files in it and you want everybody to have access to all 5 of those files, you can grant access to the folder. Okay, but what I can't do is check off 5 files and grant access. As a matter of fact, on the web side, where is my web portal here? If I select more than one file, notice the share command disappears, which means I can't do that. All right. So it might seem a little tedious, but again, we have to have individual keys for every file because basically when you share stuff, a web link is created, and there's just no way for one web link to point to multiple files. Okay, so again, if you need to share multiple files with somebody, the best thing to do would be set up a folder, put the files in that folder, and share the folder. That's the best way to do it. Okay. Again, that should be for a limited time only, though, right? We're peer-to-peer sharing here. So back to the Windows client. All I do is I right-click, and I'm going to choose, it even has the little blue clouds here. It says Share. Now, here's the tricky thing on the Windows side. Caution, you will forget maybe what I told you, and the best I can do is tell you this. In Windows, there are a lot of other things labeled Share. However, and I couldn't resist the joke here, however, these are not the share commands you are looking for. Okay, only use the share command that I just showed you to share stuff via OneDrive. Here's what I'm talking about. In Windows, there actually is a share thing up here. That's not OneDrive sharing. That's actually something different, okay? There is even when you right click, if you look down, there's this whole give access to that sounds like a share thing. That is not what you want there either. In your version of Windows, maybe you may also see there was another one somewhere. I don't want to spend time looking for it. Regardless, here's my point. When you want to do OneDrive sharing on Windows, first off, you got to be in your OneDrive. But secondly, the only command that you want is this one here that says share. And when I pick that, you'll see it brings up the same box that we saw earlier over in the web portal. Again, we'll go through this in a few minutes. Okay, literally exactly the same box. All right. If you're in the Office applications and you want to share, it's pretty much the same deal. Let's go over to Word. Let me go to File. Now I need to open something that's actually on OneDrive. So let me open up, actually, maybe I don't need to do that. Let's go to Share. Okay. In OneDrive, I'm sorry, in any of the Office applications, there is a Share menu here, and the first thing here says Share with People. Now, the file already needs to be on OneDrive. In this case, this is a new document, so it says Save to Cloud. But what I could do is then save to cloud, and then I could share it. If you've already opened something from OneDrive, this will say this will stay and it will say instead share with people. Let me look again real quick here. Let me go back to my files. Actually, let me open something on my OneDrive. Let me go here. Let's go into here, here, and we'll just open that. Takes a moment to come up. There we go. Now I can show you the right thing. So let's go to File. We go to Share. Notice now the button says Share with People. It's already got to be on OneDrive, so we can do that. I can do Share with People, and oh, and I can get some sort of weird error that, of course, didn't come up earlier when I tried this today. Something is preventing us from sharing at this time. I wonder if that's strange. Let me try one more time. Share with people, share with people. All right, well, the same box would come up. Why does this always happen during class? I swear to my mother's grave. That just always happens during a training session. All right, the same box comes up, trust me. I'll check into what's going on there later. All right, back to my PowerPoint. So before you start sharing in the Office apps, make sure the file is already saved to OneDrive. Okay? In all of these cases, so all three of them, the only difference is how you start. But then once you do start the process, so let me come back over to the website here. Let me start the share. Once you start, all of the steps are the same. Basically, the default is anyone with the link can edit, but if that's not what I want to have happen, I just click that. And depending on your different company policies and whatnot, some of these may or may not be available. We'll go into all of these a lot more in the intermediate class, but briefly here, the top section here is what kind of link do you want to create? Do you want anyone to be able to do this? Do I want to give people in my company? Do I want to do this with specific people? All of those affect the type of link that's generated. So if I do something with specific people, even if somebody else gets the link, they're not going to be able to open it because they're not authorized. If I do anyone with the link, yeah, anybody who gets the link can open and maybe work with the file. So there's lots of options here about the kind of sharing you want to do. But again, be aware, your company policies, and especially in government, may be different. A lot of times in government, again, this is my experience, a lot of the anyone, that's always turned off. They're like, no, we don't want anyone with the link being able to get to files. So often you're limited to like specific people and maybe people with existing access. Some places even turn off the whole anyone at your company. The other setting, though, there's the other settings down here are also good stuff. The default when you give somebody a link is that you're going to allow them to edit the file. But you can do it so that they can just read it. And all you got to do is uncheck this box. That can be good for maybe you don't want to email somebody a very large file. Or you just don't want them to, you just want them to look at stuff. But you can allow or disallow editing. You can set an expiration date for the link so that it's not out there forever. So I could say, okay, I'm going to share this, but after 30 days, that link's not going to work anymore. You could even set a password individually for that file. That's also very cool. You can also do something called block download. So, and again, that's a security feature so that people can't make local copies. I must caution you on all of these settings here that I'm showing you right now. Your company policies and procedures and governance may or may not allow some of these things to even be available down here. So what you see may vary. Hey, select your options. And then put in email addresses to send this to, or select people at your company, write your message, and then click send. And then that's going to generate a link. If you click send here, obviously an email is going to go out to the people that you address this to, and then they're going to be able to click that link and get into the file. Okay, but there's, we'll dive into that process a lot more in the intermediate class, but that is a quick rundown on how all of that works. Okay. In the mobile app, oh, I forgot I had this in here. I thought I didn't. You can share in the mobile app. Easy enough, bring up the application, find the file, select it, and then follow the steps in your different operating system to share. In Android, the symbol usually looks like 3 dots connected by 2 lines. In iOS, it kind of looks like this square with an arrow pointing up. I believe that's the share icon there. But the steps in each of those environments are different and looks different, and so that's why I don't want to open that can of worms here. But yes, you can share via the mobile app. And as a reminder about the mobile app, you might not even be allowed to use it. So just be aware of that. So no matter what method you do use to share files, yes, that's usually communicated by email, is that a link is going to go out to those people. Now, you can also copy and paste that link and put it into an email as well. So if you don't want OneDrive to send the email, you can actually send it yourself. You can just copy the link, paste it in a document or an email or in an instant message or whatever. So, basically the person gets the link, they click on it, and the file's going to open. Okay. Again, if you've set a password, they may have to do that. They may have to log in with credentials. There's lots of different things there, and we'll save some of that for the intermediate class. There may be additional steps to getting to that resource, and a lot of that may have to do with company policies, or whether somebody can log in with their other Office 365 credentials, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot that goes there. So I don't want to say it's always this or always that, because there's far too much variation in that space. What I'll say is, look, somebody's going to get a link. They're going to click that link, which is basically going to give them access to that file. Okay. All right, so that is the basic stuff for sharing files in OneDrive. It's your OneDrive. You're the one that can give the ability then to share stuff. The method is pretty much the same, just kicking it off is different. So again, look back at those other slides and see, okay, how do I kick off the sharing process? And then once you kick off the process, it's the same box. Choose your options. Who do you want to go to, and send it. And then OneDrive takes care of the rest. Yay. Now, once you have shared something with someone, you may want to manage that. You may want to change their access, or take it away, or add more users, or change their permissions. There's lots of things you can do. Again, we'll go into a more detailed look at this in the intermediate class, but I, at least at a basic level, want to show you the basics, right? I don't want to leave you too high and dry on that. You can change, you can manage the permissions and manage these things from any of the ways, from the web, the Windows, and Office. It didn't used to be that way. It actually used to be that you could only use the web portal to change or manage access. But again, thank you, Microsoft. They've now moved everything up to so that it's pretty much the same in all places. The one thing I will say is, as of April 15th, 2020, you cannot do these things in the mobile app. You will have to use one of these other methods to do the stuff we're about to talk about. That is the only one that's different. While it's possible to use the web, Windows, and Office, Scott recommends that you use the web portal. It's actually just a lot easier. It really is, for at least managing access. For granting the access and for sharing, it's a cinch on all of them. But if you want to manage and change stuff, it actually is a lot easier in the web. So that's the one I'm going to show you here. So if you want to manage and change access to a file, now I need to go to some that have, let me go here, I need to go up directories and change. Let me go here to this public directory because I know I've got some that are shared. And I first off know that because look, when something is shared and you're looking in, this is again another advantage of the web portal, it will tell you files that are and are not shared. You can't really see that information when you're over in Windows or other places, okay? So let me select this file. And then I'm going to open the details pane. We talked about that earlier. And of the many things that are on the details pane, I'm getting there. Somebody just asked the question, does it tell you who you've shared with? Yes, it would be right here. Good question, Sharon. Thank you. Yes, yes, right here in this section right here where it says has access, you would see little icons for all of the people in your company that you've granted access to. Let me go in here and click manage access, and this will make a little more sense. When you give access to both internal and external, without getting overly technical, because Office 365 kind of has no awareness of what happens outside of it. If you do and are allowed to share with external users, they will just get a link, but Office 365 isn't going to track that. So for instance, if I shared a file from here with my mother, who is not part of my not part of my Office 365 tenant here, she would get a link, but her name is not going to show up anywhere here because OneDrive just has no way of tracking and does not keep track of the individual email addresses. Mostly because email addresses can be spoofed and they're not internet standard in some ways. So all it does is like, look, here's the link that went out. I have no idea who you gave it to. Okay, so that's what this links giving access is that is for the external users. If you have given people access at your own company, all right, that you work with on OneDrive, they will be listed in the direct access section because OneDrive does know those people. It knows the credentials and so on and so forth. So to kind of answer the, does it tell you who you've shared with? It depends. If it's internal people that are part of your company or your installation, yes, their names and all that stuff will appear here in direct access. If it's somebody outside, you will not see a list of names, but you'll see something here that just says links giving access, and there's just going to be a blanket listing there for that link. Now, what I can do from this panel here is turn those links off, get rid of them, change their permission, or do additional sharing. Same thing with the people that are here. If I've got, Scott, Mary, Joe, and Sam all here, I can take their permissions away. If I've given them edit access, I could change it to read access or vice versa. And I can even add more people right from here. Now, if I grant access, all of mine are just called student accounts. So I could add, one of the 5 students that I've got in here, but those are the only ones that are inside of my tenant. Okay. So this manage access pane allows me to manage both the internal and external access to my file. Again, if your company or business or whatever does not allow the external access, this whole links giving access isn't going to be here. It isn't really going to work. It's going to be direct access stuff. Okay. So there's just a little crash course in the managing of access. Another key part to understand, okay, so I've also got on the slides here how to get to the manage access in Windows and in Office. I don't have time to go through those, but I'll leave the slides up here for a few moments. You'll see again, the Windows client and from Office do allow you to manage access. It's not as robust as the web portal, so I would really suggest you use the web portal. You don't have to, but you can also use the Windows client in Office. I kind of already showed you this. Once you're in there, you can grant, change, remove, create a new sharing link, remove any sharing links. You can do all kinds of stuff from that panel. It's basically your control panel for who have I given keys to and who have I not, all right? What I must remind you of for all of this is that Your sharing in your OneDrive is your responsibility. This is your kingdom. This is your fiefdom. This is your house. This is your land, however you want to look at it. And generally, even at most companies, they are not going to meddle in that or do anything with it. So if you give people access to a file, it's up to you to make sure that after they're done with it, you turn that off or set an expiration date on the links or occasionally review who you've given access to, look through who you've shared things with. Um, you're the one that's responsible. Okay, nobody's going to come by and go, hey, Mary, you shared this file in your OneDrive like a year ago and people can still get to it. Is that what you want? No, that's not going to work that way. This is up to you to manage that. On the flip side, hey, this is yours. You're the owner. You get to decide. You get to decide things, and nobody else does. Okay, nobody else can share things that are on your OneDrive. All they can do is make a copy of it, and then you've got a copy, and that's not the same. Okay. So to summarize managing access, we'll go into more detail in the intermediate course, but just to make sure that at least even at the intro level, you've got a flavor of this and you know what to do. Look, once you've granted or shared a file with somebody, you can modify access, take it away, give more out, and so on and so forth. I would recommend using the web portal to do all of that sharing. Okay, all right. Um, I've got a review section here. All the review is I just usually grab all the summaries, because if you notice, I like to have summaries at the end of every section. So all I've done for you here is I've just pulled in all of the summaries from every section. I will go through these slowly, so those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can review these. For those of you online, I need to send you the slides. So hold on, don't dump off at the end of class. I'll send you the attachment. I'm sorry, I forgot to post the file, but I'll send you the attachment with all of these slides in it. But again, this review section just reviews all of those final bullet points from every section. So just take a look at these, know the different access methods, how to get to stuff, how to manage files, all this good thing, all that stuff about sharing and about managing the access. All right, some last things to wrap up. So those of you online, don't run away yet. I got a few things to wrap up, and then we'll close the recording and then we'll do Q&A. If you need more help or want to learn more things about OneDrive, I highly recommend just going to Microsoft's support site at support.office, not support.microsoft. Go to support.office.com. All Office products and Office 365 things, that is their main help center. Just click on OneDrive. Just be careful when you're in there, because since OneDrive does come in two types, just make sure that you're looking at things for OneDrive for Business or OneDrive Personal, depending on your needs. Remember, they are different products. If you happen to be a bit more tech curious and expert level-y type stuff, I don't know why you'd be watching this video in general, but hey, maybe you just like to start off. But if you're curious about more technical things about OneDrive, go to docs.microsoft.com. And again, that's where you can see lots of information about tons of products and all the back-end stuff and how all that stuff works. As far as me, well, I think most of you on this call kind of know this stuff, but I'll put it out there anyways. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know that I've got YouTube videos out there. But if there's anybody attending today's training that has not yet seen my YouTube channel, just go out to YouTube and search for Scott Kinsella, and you'll see all of the videos that I've got posted out there. If for anybody, whether you are watching this on YouTube or people that are on the call right now, if you've not yet joined the Beardy MCT on Facebook, that is the place where you can find all of the live sessions that I will be doing, like this one. I try to do 1, 2, 3 a week, depending on my schedule and what people want. But the Facebook group is where I send out the invites. And then it's also where I ask people, what do you want to see? And you can offer feedback, and you can even ask questions and all that fun sort of stuff. So that's a public group on Facebook. Just go ahead and join it, and you can stay abreast of all the things that are out there. So thank you for giving me 90 minutes or 89 or whatever time I took here to talk to you about OneDrive for Business and its intro features. I hope you've learned something new. I encourage you to look at other videos that I've got out there and keep learning, and I hope to see you at a future class.